Yo, what's up, guys? It's Andrew from travelingguitarist.com. Today I'm talking to you about the differences and similarities between the bass guitar and the electric guitar. And I'm also going to answer the question, can guitarists play bass? This is there's a more complicated answer to the question and there's a more simple answer to the question. Right off the bat, I'd say, yeah, guitarists can play bass because the structure of the two instruments is very similar on a fundamental level, including the way in which you play the actual notes on the two instruments. It's pretty much the same. However, it comes with a big however. They're ultimately different from each other, and there's a few things that a guitarist should keep in mind and understand and come to know if they really want to play the bass properly. So right away, let's just talk about some of the similarities between the two. Like obviously, when you look at the bass guitar and the electric guitar, you can see that they use the same kind of system. They use the fret and string system. So you use your one hand to fret the notes, and then use your other to pluck or push the notes or finger the notes. So I mean that's one similarity right off the bat. So while they are different from each other, they're kind of the same in that way. So it's going to make that transition a lot easier. It's going to be a lot easier to transition from, say, learning the guitar, six-string guitar, to the piano. Or excuse me, it's going to be a lot easier to make the transition from the electric guitar to the bass guitar than the six-string guitar to the piano, because the way in which you play the notes is completely different, right? Because you use keys. It's not a fret system anymore. Another thing that's similar is that they use the same equipment, and that includes, like, you have your amplifier and you have your guitar, and then you plug the bass guitar and electric guitar into the amp. And the way in which you organize pedals and stuff and the way you use pedals is the same as well. Also, the electronic structure is the same. Like, you still have the pickup system, where the electronic pickups literally pick up on the vibrations of the string and send it through the amplifier. With that said, I mean, there's some differences between the two, because on the electric guitar you have your neck and your bridge pickup, and the difference between those two in sound is quite pronounced. Like the difference between the bridge and the neck pickup, it's large. Whereas in the bass guitar, it's not so much. I mean, the bass guitar is more restricted in terms of its frequencies. Also, another similarity is applying musical standard notation. Assuming you know how to read music, if you can read music on the guitar, this goes for the same as every instrument really. If you know how to read music, all you need to do is you need to know how to play those notes on that instrument. So when you're playing the guitar versus the bass guitar, if you already know how to read standard notation, you know how to read the treble clef and bass clef, you're already a step ahead. In conjunction with the fact that the two instruments are quite similar, I mean, you're going to be able to pick up on that a lot easier. You just have to know the notes of the bass clef. Furthermore, a lot of the playing techniques are similar. Obviously, there's some differences, but a lot of them are similar. You have your hammer-on and your hammer-offs, which are also called slurs. You have vibrato, although it's not as common on the bass. The slides, glissandos, tapping, arpeggios, chords, and so on and so forth. Because the structure of the two instruments are the same, you can ultimately kind of apply what you know on one to the other. Another thing that's worth mentioning is that you can even do the slapping, popping technique on the electric guitar. You can do that on the bass and the electric guitar. It's not nearly as common on the electric guitar, but some people can do it, and they can do it very well. What else? Also the setup. So obviously, stringing a guitar is the same as stringing a bass guitar. And also, like, you have your tuning knobs, your posts, your frets, your bridge, your neck, your nut. And, you have your truss rod adjustments and, adjusting the action at the bridge. You adjust the intonation similarly. And, so there's a lot of similarities, but there's also some differences. And we're going to explore the differences right now. So right off the bat, the size of the instrument, the bass tends to be quite a bit bigger. The neck of the instrument tends to be quite a bit longer due to the fact that the strings are much thicker, and the pitch needs to be around an octave lower. So on account of the lower octave of the instrument, the strings have to be much longer, and the neck also has to be much longer to be adjusted to the appropriate pitch. Even the knobs on the bass guitar are a little bit bigger. The tuning knobs on the end of the neck are bigger as well. And, as I said, the strings are thicker. So, I mean, it's going to take you time to get used to that when you're trying to apply the same techniques, including arpeggios and so on. Also, bass amplifiers are different. I read about that in another article. A bass guitar amp usually has more power and wattage, The speakers are much bigger, and also the EQ optimization of the bass guitar amplifier is a bit different because it's more adjusted for lower frequencies, right? Like low mid. So make sure you check out that article as well. Also, on the bass guitar, there's more of an emphasis on playing with your fingers, and it really depends on the type of player you are. But some of the best players, it's a mixed bag really. But usually the people who play with their fingers, I feel like, get a lot more respect for whatever reason. Maybe that respect is totally arbitrary. I don't know. It really depends on how you look at it. But some people argue that when you use your fingers on the bass guitar, it forces you into a mindset that's more suitable to the foundations of the bass. And what I mean by that is that if you're focused on using your fingers, you're kind of pushed into a mindset where you're more geared towards playing the rhythm section. You're playing less notes, and you're more inclined to play the notes that make up the foundation of the music. For instance, the rhythm section. So there's that as well. Also, another thing is that on the guitar, you kind of pluck the strings, On an electric guitar, you pluck it with a pick. It's like a plucking motion. Whereas for bass guitars, it's more of a pushing. Like if you're using your fingers, you're pushing on the notes. You're pushing backwards, kind of. I guess it would be more like a pull. But you land your finger on the string above or below, and it creates more of like a thumping motion, which is more conducive to like the rhythm section quality of the bass, And what's this? This is called a rest stroke because you're literally resting your finger on the next string, in comparison to a guitar where it's a free stroke. Where if you're playing fingerstyle on your guitar, your picking hand is hovering around the strings, and that's why it's called free, because it's like you're not resting, you're moving your hands around, and obviously that form is more conducive to playing melodies and whatnot, whereas for the bass, the rest stroke is more conducive to the rhythm section. So people will recommend doing the rest stroke in the bass because then it's more conducive to rhythm. Additionally, there's really an emphasis on bassists working with the rhythm section. As I've said a few times already, the bassists are usually we usually talk about bass guitarists in conjunction with the kick drum. So the bass and the kick drum kind of go hand in hand together, as well as the snare drum. They're usually kind of related to each other. Not always, of course, but the bass guitarists are usually directed to like pay attention to those two instruments, those two parts of the kit, because that's really where the music comes from, right? Because you're emphasizing the rhythm and you're working together. It's very synchronized, which is kind of one of the reasons that people like Red Hot Chili Peppers so much. It's like the relationship between the members of the band. They're very synchronized together. Including the bassist, the drummer, and the guitarist, and obviously Anthony Kiedis is in there as well, the singer. And I would say the final difference is obviously the frequencies of the bass in comparison to the guitar. On the bass guitar frequencies, the primary frequencies lie between 50 hertz and 200 hertz, whereas on the guitar has a little bit more range, but I would say that the primary frequencies of an electric guitar and an acoustic guitar, it's about between 1,000 kilohertz and 4,000 kilohertz. Now, obviously, there are frequencies at 100 hertz and also at 6, 7, 8,000 kilohertz, but the vast majority of the electric guitar's frequencies are between like 1,000 and 4,000 kilohertz. Although I'm sure, when it comes to that kind of stuff, people will argue different. But for instance, when I'm EQing a guitar and I'm just looking at the EQ of where all the frequencies are lying, I would say the vast majority of them are between 1,000 and 4,000. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So while the two instruments are kind of like structurally the same, how you approach one in comparison to the other is different. And but with that said, because they're so similar to each other, it's kind of like I think you can quickly pick up on the differences between the two and use your knowledge and your way of understanding the bass. You can quickly learn that and then apply it. And I think it's very possible that a good guitar player with proper education could probably become a very decent bassist in like a year, possibly even 6 months. I'm sure people like Adam Neely would disagree with that. I don't know what he thinks really, but yeah, I would think that it's entirely possible. You just have to study the instrument and kind of, apply the things that you're being taught. But anyway, that's all for this video. Yeah, have a nice day.